Welcome to Energy Matters 2U. Today is August 21st, 2019. Energy Matters 2U is a communication platform that features technologies and thought leaders working to advance energy efficiency. The Energy Matters 2U podcast seek to connect buyers with sellers so that practical, cost-effective energy efficiency and sustainable energy solutions continue to gain market traction. We're your hosts. My name is Leo Ryan, and on the line is my co-host, Ron Galuli. Ron, happy summer.
Good morning, Leo. Yes, it's winding down, sadly, but looking forward to the fall. There's always a lot of activity in our marketplace, so looking forward to that.
So speaking of activity, today we have a focus today on some international activity. We've got Stephen Thomas, who's the Representative Director of Asia Focus. He's our guest. But before we bring Stephen on, Ron, we were talking about some of the associations that we've interacted with over the last couple of years that work to introduce foreign service providers into the New England and Massachusetts marketplace. And I was talking about like the Fraunhofer Institute. Have you interacted with those guys?
I did have some experience with Fraunhofer. They were doing a study. It was actually First Fuel at the time. Actually, the company's name was IB Logics at the time before they became First Fuel. And they actually did a dry run with their tool utilizing, I think it was actually National Grid's office data. And the results of that study actually proved out very well for First Fuel.
Yeah. So Fraunhofer's around the world, obviously the function of one of the key functions of Fraunhofer is to advance the interests of German-based in this technology companies. And so on the south end, I don't know, it's going back 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 years, they put together a building and they worked with companies like First Fuel who provided some technologies for that. And that building's still functioning. They've got tenants in there. Eric Graham and Crowd Comfort are in that building. The other group that I interact with is the French Tech Hub. And they still are active in the Boston area. They've got a San Francisco office as well. And Schneider Electric has been real supportive to that group. And they bring in some interesting companies. So those are the European ones. But today we've got Stephen Thomas, who's with Asia Focus. And Asia Focus is located, I'll read from the website. They operate at the intersection of new energy and the deregulated power markets in Japan and Asia by providing sales solutions for U.S.-based companies in renewable energy and intelligent infrastructure. So, Stephen Thomas, welcome to Energy Matters 2U.
Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Ron. Glad to be on.
Good. So, Stephen, let's start right with setting the stage. And why don't you give us a little bit of a background? What is Asia Focus's business?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for having me on the broadcast. So let me just kind of set the picture up. As I grew up in an international home, I realized the world is bigger than the U.S. And so Asia happens to be 60% of the world's population, and with that, about 60% of the world's energy consumption. And in Asia, Japan is the largest OECD country. And as we all get, from Japan, Korea, Taiwan, and of course China, that supplies all the world's electronics, cars, machinery products. So it's a very, very important aspect of modern life today, and energy is right at the center of that. So having a career of 25 plus years in Asia, I see Japan as the model for the new energy infrastructure. We all know, about Japan having really high quality products and a very uniquely special culture. But what most people don't know in the U.S. is how robust the civil infrastructure is in Japan. Roads, waste energy management systems, transportation systems. The society puts a focus on robust, very sustainable implementations that are really positively integrated into the civil society infrastructures. And because we here in the U.S. are driving a lot of innovation, I see Japan as the model and that really the gateway to all of Asia for the new energy economy.
So, Stephen, let's talk about you mentioned like the consumer products that come out of Japan and the infrastructure that Japan provides. So, can you talk to us specifically about what's the unique opportunity in Japan in energy represented by Japan?
Yeah. So Japan today if you really look at the world today in terms of the opportunities, Japan is the biggest market opportunity for new innovation in energy. And why is that? Well, it all stems out of what happened on March 11th, 2011. The Fukushima triple disaster, the tsunami, the ensuing, the earthquake, the tsunami, and the ensuing nuclear meltdown, it created an impetus for what Japan decided to do is to modernize its grid. Even though it already had a very robust physical hardware infrastructure for the grid that was up to date and very robust, and it was a structure that was very rigid and siloed. And there was very little renewable energy back in 2011. So the Japanese government very conservatively created very strong feed-in tariff incentives modeled after Europe for solar, wind, biomass, geothermal, extremely attractive markets in the renewables, and then went about the process of creating a multi-stage deregulation of the electricity market, starting with deregulating the mass retail market, deregulating, and then step towards wholesale market deregulation reform. And they're still midway through this. But what this is, the result of this is a huge opportunity for Western companies with very rich products, sophisticated products in software, storage and integration, new renewable solutions and technologies to compete in Japan. Because the Japanese don't have a monopoly on innovation. They just have created one basic big ISO. The biggest ISO in the world today is the country of Japan. Interesting.
So I'm taking that, Stephen, that one of the results of that Japanese earthquake and tsunami and the destruction of a major part of the nuclear fleet was the creation of a new administration, a new way of regulating energy within Japan. Is that a fair summary?
Well, what the Japanese are very organized, and so the government took it upon themselves. The Ministry of Economy, Trade, and Industry took it upon itself to look at all the markets of the world, Europe, U.S., where there had been deregulation, and really do a lessons learned how to do this. So they created a phased process that, with a high emphasis on reliability and security and customer-driven benefits, how to deregulate their markets. How to create an infrastructure so that renewables could be easily integrated and new digital technologies could be part of that solution. So today you can see that there are 84 million homes in Japan. There are over 20 million commercial and industrial customers. They have the biggest ISO, independent system operator, in the world. But it's a complicated system, meaning there are multiple stakeholders. Their access to affordable energy is a human right. So this is a huge undertaking that is unfolding over the course of several years.
Okay, so we got Stephen Thomas growing up in an international household who recognizes early that there's not just one way of approaching energy in this case. And so you're going to apply your talents to the Japanese marketplace. Obviously, this opportunity created by this organized culture that has put together a system that, through your explanation, is going to allow the rapid integration of renewables. This is complicated from a technology standpoint. We talk about that a lot here at Energy Matters to You. So, Stephen, what is the approach of Asia Focus, and what is the specialty? What are the specific services that you bring to this complicated marketplace?
Sure. Well, first of all, about me, I have about 25 years of business development, sales management experience in Japan and Asia, initially focused around complex software solutions. So what I have is a team of professionals, all technically savvy sales professionals, and we built an organization that focuses on taking innovative solutions from primarily Western companies to market in Japan. Now, what is important, though, to understand is how you sell in the West is not the same as in Japan. I mean, there are a few important points that most Western companies fail to understand. And because of that, it's a little dirty secret in the industry that 7 out of 10 new ventures in Japan fell, and they fell miserably because they failed to understand the differences in the sales process in Japan versus the West. What we do is, because we are a largely Japanese and very internationally savvy sales team, we know how to bridge the gaps between the sales process in the West and what works in Japan.
You brought up a good point about the earthquake and tsunami and how that was a catalyst for energy efficiency and renewable energy in Japan. In fact, there's an article in Green Tech Media in 2014 that talks about that same event and how that was a motivating factor for the country to move forward with energy efficiency and renewable energy. How has the solar and storage market developed there, and how has that developed in relationship to what's going on in the United States?
Yeah, so the solar market has boomed since the feed-in tariff was put in place beginning in July 2012. Today, there are about 45 gigawatts of solar online. Almost all of that came online in the last 5-6 years. And most of that solar, interesting enough, is not, even though it's called utility scaled, it's typically 2 megawatts and less. And that has to do with a couple of things. One is the lack of available space to build large-scale utility-scale solar, and two is the way the voltage lines are spec'd. So if you think about 2 megawatts, and typical solar installation, commercial installation will be anywhere from 50 kilowatts to 2 megs. That's a lot of solar, 45 gigawatts. Plus, there's another 40 to 45 gigawatts that is permitted and yet to come online. Now, the storage market is really where there's a market that's yet to completely develop, and in part because the issue around demand charges has not been sorted out. Japan does not have exactly the same penalty around demand-related charges that you have in the U.S. And as you know, storage has been a relatively a tough market to develop here in the U.S., but it is developing with the decreasing cost of the storage pack. I see companies like Stem and Sunverge, which are leaders in the U.S. They all have investors from Japan. Mitsubishi, Mitsui have invested heavily in these companies. TEPCO is the largest utility in Japan. They are a stakeholder as well. The storage market is a market to come in Japan.
You'd mentioned earlier about the overwhelming failure of new ventures in Japan, the 7 out of 10 fail, and part of that has to do with the inability to understand the sales cycle in Japan. Can you talk a little bit about what's different and unique about that sales process?
I would love to. That's really where my specialty comes in with myself and my team. First of all, I don't know if people realize this or not, but Japanese are really the most demanding customers in the world, particularly around quality and service levels. So that's one aspect. Where U.S., we typically favor speed and functionality, Japanese prefer to have reliability and high quality. Two, the way power is distributed around a Japanese company is really kind of inverted to the way it is in the U.S. In Japan, the power really starts to make decisions to do anything new. It doesn't start at the top of the organization. It starts at the team members level, because it's a very different culture in terms of the way decisions or changes made within an organization. And finally, the decision process around choosing a product, particularly a product from a foreign company that doesn't have a lot of presence, or it doesn't have any presence maybe in Japan, is going to be different. Generally in the U.S., I mean, I've worked for a number of enterprise software companies at my first stage of my career, and there was a lot of focus on selling on ROI, value propositions to the customer, et cetera, those kinds of things. In Japan, those things are much less important. Companies do not buy on ROI in Japan. They buy on quality of the relationship, the value, the level of support you can bring to the market, and their expectations around the viability of the company or business beyond the next 2 or 3 years, but even longer. Those kinds of cultural differences play dramatically into the ability of a foreign company to be successful in Japan.
Great. Okay, so they've got to be reliable, high quality. It's a team member driven adoption investigation, and then making sure that the relationship is strong and there's a clear process to ensure follow-up and long-term relationship. So, Stephen, can you give some typical examples of qualified prospects or types of customers?
Absolutely. So what we would look for is a company that has a compelling solution, one with references, that has shown that they have a product that is differentiated in the market. An example of companies that done this are like AutoGrid. AutoGrid started several years ago in Japan. They provide a VPP, virtual power plant software management framework. And they are now building out their business in Japan, but they started early.
So, Stephen, you provided an example of AutoGrid as being a successful voyager into the Japanese marketplace. Do you think of other good candidates for Asia Focus's services?
Yeah. So other companies that would be very successful in this market are those providing a customer management platform for retail electricity or gas services. Several of those companies have already entered the Japan market, and I've worked with a handful of them, getting their teams together and finding their first sets of customers.
What should a qualified, interested company do next if they're serious about going to Japan with their offering or the Asian markets in particular?
So the first and most important thing is that the senior management, the founder of the company, has some kind of way, some vision for the company in Asia, and they're able to articulate what their expectations are. Beyond that, it's then having a compelling solution with some track record in the West, some reference they can go to and call upon. And then there really isn't a lot of financial commitment to get started. It's much more important to have a commitment to see this through until there's an assessment whether the market is ready for them. And if there is, then a very staged process of making minimal investments to find a sales team, find a technical rep, and then focus on building partnerships to take the company to the market.
Excellent. Super. Hey, Ron, anything else that you're thinking about you want to ask Stephen?
So, Stephen, it sounds like the technologies and various business models that you're trying to integrate over there, typically mostly software related, it sounds like, that have some type of function that can help facilitate the growth of either energy efficiency, renewable energy, or help support their market development.
Well, yes, it is a very, very, very big part of the kinds of clients I work with. The digitalization of energy is like every other industry, being able to enable utilities, infrastructure providers, energy service providers to be more efficient, more customer-centric, and more competitive in the market. And that's software. Software is at the backbone of this. But it is not limited. Renewables and technologies around renewable generation, from hydrogen to offshore wind, are also very attractive areas for companies with compelling products and solutions to look at Japan. Offshore wind market in Japan is on the verge of being the biggest in Asia. With the expertise around here in Massachusetts, some of the suppliers of solutions are parts of the ecosystem should also be looking at Japan and even Taiwan as markets.
That's great.
It's not just software. Software. Software is a big part, though.
Okay.
Stephen, I know you're a big participant in local conferences. You got anything on your calendar that folks could see you, meet up with you?
In terms of follow through, if a company is ready to look at Asia, I mean, I'm happy to take inbound call or whatever it may be in terms of how we initiate a discussion. One of the things I'm in the process of planning out is actually taking some of the conferences we've had here around energy storage, solar, and microgrid solutions, the participants to market, partnering with the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, showcasing their products, their capabilities, not just in Tokyo, but all around the different prefectures in Japan. The governments, the prefectures out of Tokyo are very interested in investing in new new energy solutions, technologies, companies, and renewable sources. So nothing local, but what we've done here local, we're looking to bring it to Japan.
Well, that's great. And I know on your business card that the URL is AsiaFocus, one word, .biz, B-I-Z. So Stephen Thomas at AsiaFocus. Well, very good. Any last minute thoughts you want to get on, or should we wrap up here?
What works, the U.S. is a great place for getting your first reference, but if you want to build a sustainable business long term, you got to be in Asia.
Absolutely.
The future.
Outstanding. That's a huge market. So Stephen Thomas, AsiaFocus, thanks so much for being part of Energy Matters 2U. We'll be paying attention to you, and please reach back out if we can be of any assistance to you.
Thank you.
So Ron, what else do we have on the calendar for Energy Matters 2U? We got anybody coming up?
We have Kendall Investments, and they manage investments in sustainable type of infrastructure. So they're on our schedule within the next month.
That's great. And I had some news from the leadership of Stacks and Jules, who was on with us in July. They'd set up a scholarship fund to try to pay for an internship for 2 high school students as they learn about building programming. And they were successful in their fundraising efforts, so they were able to provide paid internships. So kind of exciting development for the folks at Stacks and Jules. So once again, I want to thank Stephen Thomas from AsiaFocus for being part of Energy Matters 2U. And as always, Ron Galuri, a pleasure spending time with you. We'll be signing off here. There's work to be done. Go make a difference. Thank you.